everybody. This is the voice of EMS. I am Charles McFall, of course, put on by One EMS here, and joined by
I didn't put my
Laverne.
T-shirt on.
Oh yeah, you can. It's okay though. It's all right. We're joined by Laverne Hardwick here, who I've had the pleasure of being introduced to multiple times by mutual friends, and we've gone to a few conferences and interacted. And she's one of the few people I've found that instantly just loves sharing her opinion as much as I do, and has come from a long history of EMS, but also different EMS than I'm used to. And in some of the conversations we've had, I was very, very interested in what she had to say. And today we're going to be hitting on a bunch of things, I am sure, because when it comes to Laverne and I, we just go all over the place. We're starting from the point of, what does EMS look like to you? Obviously, we look totally different. We're going to approach it totally different, not just because we look different, but because we're different people. We approach things differently. So what does it look like to you? And the story I told Laverne I was going to set up with is the last conference we were at. There's a panel of people, and the whole conference had talked about putting yourself out there, being honest with your employees and your community, and showing who you are. And I'll just be honest, there's a lack of diversity that I see in EMS, or not so much in EMS, but what's represented to the public in EMS. And I asked you, as the panel, what are you going to do about changing the perception and look of EMS? And the answer was uniforms. Everybody needs to wear uniforms and stop wearing stuff like this. Well, they didn't point me out, but stuff like this shirt. I'm wearing shorts right now, Laverne, because I'm on camera and not on the truck, because that's the thing. So, uniforms, was that the happy answer for you? Uniforms was how we're going to change EMS and make it better?
No, not at all. It's not about the clothes you wear, although I am an proponent of a neat, clean uniform. I like shirts tucked in, shoes clean. Your appearance does matter, but that's not where you were going with that, and that's not the direction I expected that answer to be in.
What would you have hoped that answer would have contained?
More of we're going to make an effort to reach out to the newer generation and then show them what it is that's kept us doing this for so long. Have to try to foster them into it and teach them to love it just like we did, or show them how to start to love it, how to get into it, and not make it such what's the not make it such a business where it's putting your nose to the grindstone every day. Although it is, but you develop an affinity for it, and you get good at it. And then when you see what the bottom line is, and that's people, this business is about people. And if you look to people and look to be that person that's there for someone on their worst day, even
Yeah.
if you're just doing a simple transport to a healthcare provider or a clinic or what have you, you can be the only smile that that person sees that day. And even sometimes when you don't want to smile, you force a smile out, and eventually that smile will start to
Sure.
resonate through you. And that's the kind of stuff um, we need to push for this generation. And I was kind of hoping for that sort of answer, maybe not that simplistic, but something like that, because what we do is not hard. It really is. It's just human nature. I think it's the kindness that you can dig deep down in yourself and find, and provide that to someone else with a few technical skills, some medication, some toys. But the bottom line of it is humanity.
Yeah, I agree. And we're gonna have comments if people want to comment. We're live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and I'm not sure how Twitter might interact with the comments, but we're definitely gonna respond to things as if people put it up there. We both come from backgrounds that did not start in the early 2000s, right? As a lot of people I work with. I started in the late 90s, and I think you did as well. You started in the Bronx or in Brooklyn? Brong Island, is that it? Brooklyn. There we go. You were not Brooklyn 99. You're Brooklyn 911. Got it. So, but I want to ask if your experience here was like mine, where when I came in, essentially nobody really said you pushed down the feelings, but it was push down the feelings. Nobody taught the motivation and the processing of how to handle that call. Because what you just said about putting the smile on, I've talked about putting your game face on. If you're having a bad day, you're with that patient for 15 to 30 minutes, depending on, I mean, yeah, in the countryside, maybe a bit longer, but you put your game face on and that's temporary, right? We have to learn how to deal with what we're dealing with, or we burn out. And this generation, the newest generation of EMTs coming through, I hate when people classify, oh, millennials or zennials and oh, they're weak. If one, LeVard, you and I are the same generation, so we're the parents here, more or less. If they're weak, it's because of how we taught them, right? If other than that, then it's maybe they're more in touch with their feelings and understand how to process and be, or at least try to be, more balanced human beings. And that's not really what I was looking for in that answer either. But I'll be real. I was asking about diversity. I look around the conference rooms that I go to, and I can count on one hand how many females are there. I can count on maybe two hands how many people of color are there. And then, I mean, people want to nitpick like, well, sexual orientation. Well, what does that look like? I can't count on any hands. That's not even a thing, right? But so, what does EMS look like to you, Laverne? What do you want to share with people of why you do it, where you came from?
Well, what does it look like to me? It looks like me. When I say me, I fit a couple of those categories that you just mentioned: female of color, and it's where I work. It does look more like me than anywhere else. But just as you, when I go to conferences and other places, even other states, oddly enough, there's not enough of this look. And I don't know. I won't say that it's because the institution of EMS is preventing it, but I do believe that the people who would fit this particular demographic, or demographics other than what we see, get the message out to them, encourage them to come to it, and show them what it is. Uh, it kind of goes back to, how they talk about community policing. So if you have community policing, you have people who become police officers that live in that community. They work in the community where they live. I think we
Yeah,
should push to do the same thing across the board in EMS. In the urban environments, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, Detroit, your EMS population, New Orleans, you're going to have more diversity because you have more of a concentration in the city. But diversity is not just limited to the city, it's out in the rural areas as well. It just has to be promoted and encouraged. And not to say that it's discouraged, but it needs to be encouraged more. I'm an advocate of the like career academies we have here in Georgia. They
mm-hmm.
start teaching EMT school in the high schools. I wish they
Yes,
would get it to more of the high schools so the kids can start doing this early. If they start doing it early, they'll start to develop that passion or love for it and that passion for it earlier on in their careers, and then they can decide whether they like it or not. And a great many of them, I think they will once they see what the type of brotherhood that we have, brotherhood, sisterhood, if you will, that we
sure, yeah.
have in this business. You and I are from two totally different worlds. We met the first time, and ever since then, we've been talking. So, because
Yeah,
we have so much more, we are so much more alike than we are different. You know what I mean? We're different at face value,
right.
but for everything else, we have so many more commonalities, similarities that I think that's how the world works. In the world in general, we're all more
Yes.
alike than we're different.
But we always focus on the differences, right?
Right.
And I'll tell you when I make statements like what I look for in a room or look around in a room and observe, I look for the differences, not for conflict, but for, okay, I know my training, I know my mindset, I know my experience and what I've come to. And yes, I've tried to broaden my experience more than maybe most people, but my experience is still not your experience, Laverne.
Right.
And that's why I'm looking for people that act differently than me, talk differently than me, so I can have different ideas and perspectives and learn things.
Right.
And but the way you get there is finding those similarities and connections. I mean,
Yes.
you've been doing EMS, if I remember right, about 25 years ish, off and on.
Off and on. I started
Yeah.
in 1992, and I
I
gave it
was
up.
five. No, I wasn't five. I was in high school in 1992.
Ah,
I
Um,
was graduating teaching EMTs by then, Laverne. You're young. Don't worry about
oh, I don't. And then I left for a while, did other things because when I was a young parent and I had a young child, and so when you have children and you're a single parent, it's a little difficult to live this life. And then I got to Georgia, and then once he graduated from high school, I decided to give up my corporate job to go back into EMS. And my friends who've known me all my life, when I told them I was doing that, they weren't surprised because they was like, "That's what you've always wanted to do." It was just a matter of time before you did it. So being older, coming back in EMS and having to start all over again, and then I had great instructors, the best instructors you could ever imagine, who saw that. Uh, You've done this before, haven't you? And I was like, kind of, sort of. I try to keep it modest, to keep it simple, but my whole premise in getting back into it is to be able to give to someone else. So eventually go in the classroom, teach back what I've been taught, and then kind of, see someone who doesn't have direction, kind of give them a direction. Because EMS will do that. If you don't have direction, you fall into the public safety, EMS, the fire service, you'll get direction. Now, whether you want to follow that direction, it's up to you, but you definitely will get direction. And so
it.
off and on for a long time, and I still love it overall. There are things about it that I could, you know, not necessarily love, but overall I do love what I do. You know, I tell people all the time when they ask me what I do, I'm a paramedic by trade, but this is what I do day to day, but I'm a paramedic by trade. That's what I am. It's what I am, it's who I am. And I love that.
I love that too. I'm that educator, that communicator, that person that and the mold that fit me was medicine. It came to me very easily. I got into this job to just figure out, just to have something decent pay. I mean, it was better than minimum wage at the time, not much better, but still a little better than minimum wage, and honorable and all this other stuff. Which I'm sorry, honored that put food on the table. So that's a non-starter, but I thought it was a starter. Um, but I was like, I'll just do this job until I figure out what my next big thing is. Am I going to go back to school? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? At 20 some odd years later, here I am still, because it just came with my natural way of thinking. And there's definitely people like that. I do remember, Laverne, I want to see if this is something that hits home for you. When I was a young EMT and I was on fire, and at the time when I came up in Georgia, it was intermediate and paramedic, and that was it.
That's
And so
it.
I was an intermediate, and there were some paramedics that are like, yeah, I'm turning in my notice. I'm leaving to go to nursing school, or I'm getting out of the field one way or the other. And I
Uh-huh.
thought, why would you ever do that? Why would you ever leave this field? And then a few years later, I'm like, yeah, I'm out. I need to breathe for a minute and go work somewhere else. Did you have that transition?
Every day.
Yeah. you know, it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Sal says here, okay, Sal. Well, first off, let me show this one. Sal says I was using Coke bottles as IV bags when I started.
The glass
Uh,
ones.
and then he says, like fire, EMS needs more hands-on conferences to help promote the excitement. Now, I was not aware there's a hands-on fire conference where people can come and play with the equipment. I got to choose my phrasing correctly here. Um, what would that look like? A hands-on, would the open community come in and learn some basics? What would that be?
I would like to see more, I won't say regional, but more conferences. Like here, when we have conferences, they're usually, we do have one in Metro Atlanta, that gets pretty good, but so that's in Metro Atlanta. But let's take it to a county. Let's do a county, do it by county, or different areas, instead of having it in one place all the time. And then when we go to the conferences, they're very educational, but you get to sit in the classroom for a very long time. Now, as a provider, when I would go to conference, I my mindset when I was younger was I went to EMT school, sat in classroom for a very long time. Paramedic school, went to class for a very, very long time, and I sat there. So how about take some of this, and as is it Sal?
Yeah.
Okay, it's saying hands on, absolutely. More breakout sessions. They don't have enough of those breakout sessions. So instead of having someone come on and drone on for an hour about how to do XYZ and show video clips. Well, let's have smaller breakout rooms, smaller conferences, smaller breakout rooms, and we all get to put our hands on stuff. He mentioned FDIC. Yeah, firemen get to go play with their toys all the time. Yeah, FDIC. Yeah, they get to play with stuff all the time and hands on. And we don't really get to do that. We get to see it, but we don't really necessarily get to do perform our skills or learn new skills and actually get to apply it. You have the conference, you have the vendor sessions where you get to see the new equipment.
Yeah.
Um, they want to sell it to you, but how
Yeah.
about set up a whole station where I could come in and actually play with it as a provider, then take it back to my manager and say, hey, this is the coolest thing. Look, go to this website, look at it. I got to play with it and I was able to do X, Y, and Z. Um, I think that would make conferences much more fun. And if we did them in closer to home in smaller pockets, it would be more affordable. The conferences that you and I go to are far, far away
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
very, very expensive. And the average EMT or EMT student or paramedic student, even worse, because I think paramedic students are more broke than EMT students. They they don't have the funds, the means, the ability, or the corporate sponsorship to go to these conferences. So they don't get
Yeah.
to see all the stuff that you and I get to see, rub elbows with doctors and fire chiefs and EMS chiefs from all over the country because they can't afford to do it.
Yeah.
So if you held one in a smaller one in DeKalb County, not specifically for anybody could come to it, but you have it in DeKalb County, well, your DeKalb County people can come. And then we have one in the city of Atlanta. The city of Atlanta people can come, and people from everywhere are invited, but you'll get a good concentration of your people from that local area to have some of the same opportunities we have when we go to South Georgia or North Georgia, or I'm going to
Yeah.
Credicon in Kentucky at the end of next month, places like that. And
Yeah.
your average kid can't afford that stuff. So let's make it affordable. Let's
You're
make it
right.
local.
And then let's make it mean something. And that's part of what the skills is it means
Yeah.
something. You'll get some credit hours, you'll learn some new tools. So coming up through EMS, I was all outside of Atlanta in the more rural areas. I never made it closer to Atlanta than Conyers, which is kind of the suburbs. It's about still
Right
15 minutes
now.
outside of
Woo
Summerville.
woo.
And that was my thought process always, was when I didn't know what the conferences were. And even then, as a young EMT, I'm looking at a bunch of old white guys, and like I was young and thought I knew everything. I did, but that didn't help anything. No, I had some wrong ideas, don't get me wrong. I had some wrong ideas, but I was like, well, they don't represent me. It didn't look like EMS to me. I didn't know how to connect. And then nobody could explain what the conference really was. They didn't really. But this is back in the days too. Recertification was a postcard, and you just went, "Yep, I did my hours." And then if you got audited, you had to prove it. And I did my hours, but I was fortunate. I had a company that just handed me all of my hours, and then literally they said, "Bring us your postcard, check mark it, we'll take care of it for you." So they tracked everything. That was one of the benefits. So I didn't see any benefit of going to the conference. Then, like you said, it's money, and most EMTs, medics, whatever level, work paycheck to paycheck, and that's how I was. And then secondly, the only other way somebody to describe a conference is you go there so you can drink. And at the time I didn't really drink, and that sounded horrible to me. It scared me, right? I mean, that's bad enough working with Roy Perry and having him say all the stuff he says to me. I didn't need to go to the conference with people drinking. And then the third point, and that was during those times, but even now, I talked with somebody at a conference, and one of his problems I said, man, there's really no connection to the wider EMS world in Georgia and this conference. I know why I come here. I come here to give, to do the one EMS thing, to really connect with people, and not so much get as in education, or that. I do get some education. I mean, some of the lectures this year were really, really good. But he said none of it matters. There's still no change. And this gentleman who's talking to me had been in EMS for at least 20 years plus, and he'd been going to the conference his whole time. And he's like, it doesn't matter. Nothing changes. And I thought that was interesting that he wanted to go to the conferences because he thought it would affect change. Laverne, besides the skills and the toys, which is always great, seeing the newest video. I remember when the video laryngoscopes came out, and I thought that was the coolest thing. And the only place to see it was a conference. Besides that, how do we make any of these conferences matter to where people go, it's important for me to be there, or will that ever be a thing?
I hope so. But we have to make them more accessible. If you make them more accessible, the kids will come, especially if you start talking about new technology and gadgets. they'll come to it. Um, and the whole process of getting your EMS renewal hours at these conferences, they'll come to it. Promotion of it, promotion within the companies. You know, you get, if you don't sign up on an email distribution list for the conferences or the associations or the organizations, you don't know. And what's the one
Yeah.
thing that all kids down there, and I won't even say kids, all of us have in common is a device.
We got
Some of us,
phones. Yep.
yeah.
Yes.
Speaking of, I'm sorry. I happen to have to carry two of them, and I have a phone at me at all times. So when we get the notifications on our phone, we pay attention to them. But they're not getting those because they're not signing up for them. How about the people that represent agencies go, I mean, organizations or conferences or sponsorships go to agencies and put out flyers and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, we're having this free." The word free.
Yeah.
Let's do some
Yeah.
freebies. Let's do some freebies, or let's do some freebies. It's free to you, but what we'll get you is some CME hours for this. It's a 2 hours of your time to do X, Y, and Z. 2 hours to come play with innovations.
Hmm.
Um, the state and the trauma commission and the associations, they do a good job in going around to different places with their cadaver labs and different classes that they have. But getting into those takes time. They're spaced out. So we need to do something to fill in those gaps in between, and I think that
Yes.
would bring us a bigger crowd, kind of engaged, because these kids want to be engaged. They always want you to have interaction with them. They don't like to
Yeah.
sit idle.
Yeah.
They want to be engaged on a TV screen, on a phone, on a tablet, on a computer. And we have to keep engaging them to keep them interested, to keep them encouraged, to keep them in the business, you know. Because the reality of it is you can take an EMT, that EMT could leave EMS and go become a blogger.
Hmm.
And if you talk about salary, hands down, we lose. So let's make it more so something that you're gonna get somebody. You're not gonna become a millionaire. You'll get somebody, but you'll get that personal satisfaction, and that since you're in touch with your feelings, you'll get that feeling of satisfaction from this industry.
Yes. Tony Robbins says, it's a video that was shared with me by Jessica Elias here recently, that one of the things he said in the video was, we feel progression, and it's the progression that makes us feel satisfied. And instantly, I think back to EMS and why people say same thing, different day, and I don't get paid enough, and we burn out. It's because we go to call after call, and the exciting calls, which really are the most traumatic, the cardiac arrests, the death calls, if you will, we like that because we use the most of our skills and we try to fight death. But let's be real, the percentage of saves there is low. You talk about trauma arrest, that's less than 1% survivability. It's like, why even bother? So you're getting no progression. And then we fail to see that the calls at 3 a.m. of vertigo. I won't even go with my stomach hurts, because I know sometimes that's just the go-to reference call of the abusers of the system. And I'm trying to avoid that, but the vertigo, where it's not life-threatening and somebody could have helped you get to the car, but I'll help you take care of it. That's where we're making a difference in somebody's life, but we don't feel that progression because we're half asleep, we're exhausted from losing throughout the day, losing progression, and it just doesn't click. We have to feel that somewhere. Otherwise, it becomes, there's never enough money in this field.
Yeah.
I think if we could do career days, right, along these lines of this FDIC, where it's, hey, we don't just come out with an ambulance and, oh, look, shiny, and you want to drive fast and see lights, but have stations, multiple stations set up that, hey, I'll teach you how to intubate. Now I'll give you, that's not a beginner skill, but it's the fun one. Right here, grab this thing, look at it, lift up this way, and people will play with that all day long, and it might hook them. And I'm going to say it. This is the opinion of Charles McFall only, but drug dealers have a good business model. You get them hooked on the good stuff, they'll keep coming back for they'll work their way up. That's all I'm saying. So we get them hooked on I can do the TV thing and clear and hit a dummy and see something change, or I can stick the tube in somebody. Well, that gets them started at EMTR. 2 weeks, man. Or depending on how they teach it, 6 weeks. In less than 3 months, you too can be driving an ambulance, and then that just opens the door to, they can go, or fire school or wherever else, right? You got to give them something to work for. And Laverne, can you think of something somebody gave you to work for? Because as I'm thinking of my early career, I didn't have anybody show me that.
My first time around, no, not really. My first time around, I was already in New York. You have vocational schools, and so I was in a nursing program, and so that medical background was there. I had a mother and an aunt who both 30 plus years in the industry of nursing, so I had that background of caring and taking care of people. I lived with my grandparents, so helping take care of them as they got older. So that was always in me, and so when I uh, had to find a job. I found a job. I became a nurse's assistant, or now they call them CNAs. I became one of those,
Okay.
but I did home care. And this is back in the early 80s, I'm sorry, early 90s, where the AIDS epidemic was really rampant and they didn't understand it and they were just trying to get a grip on it. And so you had your elderly patients that you could take care of, but there was a special classification for your infectious disease patients. And I was a maverick because I was like, yeah, I want, and they paid more.
Oh,
That's the
there you
bottom
go.
line.
Yeah. Yeah.
They paid a whopping $8 an hour. So
But compared to what, 4.25, $5 an hour minimum
three
wage?
thirty five, three thirty five,
Okay,
three dollars thirty five
3.35 at the
cents.
time.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
right. So I took that job, and what ended up attracting me, I had seen ambulance, right? They called them ambulance attendants back then. Going to work with my mom and have her friends were the ambulance attendants or orderlies or whatever they called them back then. And I knew the guys that did it, and
Sure.
so I my patient had gotten sick, and his wife called 911, and they came, and these two guys came with these white shirts and these green pants and all this equipment, and I was like, whoa. And they were the nicest guys ever. They didn't treat him any differently because of his status. They um they were kind, they were compassionate. They did what I know now is full assessments because back then I had no idea what that is. And I was impressed. Um Paper and found an EMT school where you could learn that stuff. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can you
yeah, I
still
can
hear
hear you.
me? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I went and found an EMT school because it's just these two guys, me and these two guys, and see it. I was like starstruck, like it was like movie stars were in the room or something because they were so amazing. And I found an EMT school. I saved up my little money and I got enough money and I paid for my EMT school. When I walked into the classroom, the instructor was the paramedic who came to my patient's house. He ended up being my very first instructor. And he
Nice.
sold me, I was so lock, stock, and barrel. I want to be a hero just like that. I want to be that dude. I want lights. I want all of that. And that's how I got hooked and sold on it. But and then also at that time, also with the AIDS epidemic was the crack epidemic. And
Yeah.
there were a lot of shootings and there was a lot of stuff that went on and just seeing people at their worst. And at that time I saw a lot of people at their worst. Um, and I was like, wow, I can make a difference. And then a lot of young people, and I was relatively young, but not as young as some of the patients that I see. And I would always take the time to talk to them on the way to the hospital about better choices, not being judgmental, about different choices that may have different outcomes other than the one that we have right now. And so that kind of it stuck with me, even through my absence at EMS. And then when I came back to it, so when I came back to it, I already had that. Yeah, I'm going back to be a rock star again. Forget the money at the
Nice.
bank. Forget being able to pay
Yeah.
all of my bills all the time. I'm going to I'm going to do what I love to do. I did what I had to do for those years, but coming into doing what I love to do, walk into the classroom, and one of your friends ended up being my EMT instructor.
Yeah.
And yeah, he gave me my first instructor opportunity. So I've been blessed in that. Uh, I don't if you believe in God or whoever you believe in. I believe in God, and I'll tell you that He has placed people in my life strategically at every single point of this whole EMS thing. Anytime I want to quit, anytime I'm like, forget it, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to do something else. I've got a degree in business. I'm just going to do something else. Something grabs me and snatches me back into it, and it just won't let me go. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad feeling. Um, and then I fast forward. I try to pay that forward to people that come across me. in classrooms, at conferences, on the street, at Home Depot. Hey, you ever thought about becoming an EMT firefighter? Give up my business card because I love this so much and I want to share that love with everybody else because
Yeah.
I got I think I've been blessed every chance at every juncture, every level of EMS that I've been at. There's always been somebody there who did it for me.
And that's I'm gonna put the title back up here. That hits on what does EMS look like to you. Is we start off saying, you're right, we want to see ourselves in it, and sometimes that's literal looks. Like I was a maverick, I was a rogue, I've always been a rock star. If you can't tell from my haircut, I was always that guy, and so I got into it because of a rock star moment where I saw somebody I identified with jump out of the back of a truck, kind of like you and the paramedic came in. But then as I get into the field, the instructor started off with, "You'll never make money. Why are you doing here?" And everything was kind of a negative all the way through. And then when I get into the field, that's how it was. It was just trying to break you and getting this. Well, okay, I need to get the glassy eyed look of, oh, this is so exciting. I needed to get reality. But it's like my experience was, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, to the point that I had such bad experiences sometimes. And I've told my kids, I don't want you doing fire EMS. If you're going to get in medicine, do a nurse, do a doctor. At least nurses get better paid, and they have not an easier job, but an easier situation where you're in a climate controlled facility, controlled situation where we go embrace the chaos. Same for medic and nurse, a lot of same skills. But be a doctor where you can just tell everybody what to do. You can take golf on Fridays, do that. But that, we need more people like you and Sal here in the chat. Sal does education for me at one of my companies, and I won't say where else all he works. Honestly, I lost track. This man, he loves EMS and fire, and he's in a lot of places. But we need people like that out here talking about what you love about it, why you do it, because the real question should be that nobody, when you're starting off looking at entering the field or just into the field, you don't go to the next question. If somebody goes, "Don't come here because you won't get paid," the next question should be, then why are you here? What keeps you going? Why are you showing up for work every day? And if you don't have an answer to that, stop talking to people. Stop negating everything.
How about that? Exactly. I've my motto with even my students, they all laugh at me because when they'll have students at clinicals, they'll do their clinicals and they walk into the hospital and I'm standing there like, "You work 2 jobs?" Yeah. And even back when I was still on the ambulance, when my students would get assigned, when the clinical coordinator would assign them, they would assign them to a truck and they didn't know who their preceptor was. And then they would get on the truck and they'd see me. It's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? You do what I taught you. Don't do what you see me do. Do what
Right.
I taught you in the classroom. And it's amazing because back then, I had students correct me on some of the stuff that I was doing. I'm doing what I normally do because I've been doing this forever. And they're like, "Miss Laverne, you can't do that. You have to wipe that finger twice and let it dry before you stick it." Okay, you're right. I'm sorry. And then just seeing that and just seeing those faces. And now in retrospect, when I have students come back and they are paramedics, doctors, nurses, and they come back and they say thank you, it's like, wow, I learned so much from you. When I got to nursing school, it was a breeze, all because of what I learned here. So I say when I meet kids, I'm not telling you to stay in this forever. That was my choice. But what I am telling you, it's a segue into so many other things. Because kids now, they're not like,
Uh-oh. I bet she got a phone call. She was using her camera to connect or using her phone to connect as a camera. And this happens sometimes when a phone call comes in, possibly. So I'll carry on, see if she can reconnect here. But I agree with what she's saying, right? Is one, yes, we want to make, there you are, you're back. You're saying about segueing into other businesses and growing your career.
yeah,
And I get that. We want to actually, I'm going to put this up from Sal. EMS should look like lifelong job security to individuals thinking about starting this career. Their character will make or break them. Your character is going to make or break that phone, Laverne.
Yes.
And Sal, you're right. And here's the thing. I'll tell you from my standpoint, where I sit right now today, EMS is not a career. It just isn't, because there's no progression to be had unless you get out of the field. However, we can change that, but let's not even dwell on that. Let's look at the positive. Well, what it is today is you can make a career out of it. You have to work extra hard to make a career out of it, probably become a director, a chief, an educator, or all the above. Or you can move into other areas such as movie sets, or you can then move into other careers as in PA. I know a lot of EMT students go up through paramedic and they go into PA school and become basically little doctors, right? Mini doctors. There's definitely ways to go through it, but we gotta embrace that. I think too long EMS has been elbows out. This is ours. Leave us low. We're not fire. We're not nurses. And we almost get taught that chip on the shoulder in school that I know I didn't have going in, because I didn't know what EMS was. I didn't know what empty was, which is what everybody says when I say EMT. They say I say it too fast. Like, what is empty? What are you talking about? And we got to educate the public. So there's that. When we ask the public, what does EMS look like to you? At best, we might get, are you that ambulance van? At worst, we get everything else. Like, what is that? So how do we get the general public to see what EMS is?
Education. It's education. I've been asked, "Are you an ambulance?" I'm like, I know I'm big, but geez, no. Carry lots of things, but a stretcher ain't one of them I can carry. Or you're an ambulance driver? No, I'm not. And I can tell you, I got I listed 10 partners that I've had in the past. Ask them if I'm an ambulance driver. They will tell you no. I'm many things,
Yeah.
but an ambulance driver, not at all. But it's education. Everybody knows what a fireman is. Everybody knows what a policeman is, right? But
Yeah.
they don't know. Well, here in Atlanta, everybody knows what Grady is. That's a whole different
The
thing.
Grady's, yeah.
Yeah, they know about the Grady's. They see that Grady uniform, that checkerboard bus. They know what that is. But not everybody. If you work somewhere else, not everybody knows what that is. If you've gone your entire life and never had the occasion to call 911 and need an ambulance, you really don't know what it is that we do. Lots of nurses in the hospitals don't know what it is that we do. I had a friend of mine tell me that a nurse told her that a paramedic was the equivalent of a CNA. It's like, oh yeah.
What? And they believe that? I mean,
the professor said it, and she just said she just shut up
wow.
because, And I said, I had a nurse say to me, well, what's the difference between an EMT and a paramedic? You and him can do the same things. I said, would you like it if I called you an LPN? She's like, well, no, I'm an RN. And I said, well, then there's the difference. But they don't know if they're not educated. Now the nurses in the ER, they might know, but not all over the hospitals, not all over the world, and not even physicians, anybody. John Q. Public, and we just have to educate them on that and teach them what we are. And then let the rest of the world see that our skill set is greater than just driving an ambulance and rushing to a hospital.
I'm trying to I cannot find the picture that I referenced before in the discussion. I was trying to find it, throw on the screen, but I call it the Paw Patrol problem. And that is the Paw Patrol ambulance is not an ambulance. They have a firefighter, they have a police officer, they have a helicopter, they have, I think, water rescue, but they just put the EMS with the fire, which, yeah, fire can do. I'm not trying to take away from fire, but it's my kids are growing up watching this, and I encouraged it, right? I mean, there's a picture that shows the fire truck ambulance with the doors open, and you can put patients in it, those kind of things. But that's what people see. But not all fire departments do EMS, and there is a difference. And if we could that's what we got to put ourselves out there, right? This is part of what One EMS is all about. We got to put ourselves out there. We have to be willing to take that comment. I got it in a Arby's or Wendy's one day, and they're like, "Hey, you the ambulance driver?" Now, what they were trying to do, Laverne, was give me a discount. They were trying to help me out and say thank you. They're like, "Hey, you're an ambulance driver? Well, do you see that patch? Does it look like a steering wheel?" And they just like, sorry, man, and just went on about their day. And I had that chip on my shoulder. We have to be willing to take those comments and be like, educate in the moment.
In the moment.
Yes, I
Yeah.
do drive the ambulance. We do so much more. There's basically a miniature hospital back there. Hey, yeah, it depends on the situation, right? And I'm not going to take the Burger King workers. He has to work out there and show them, but it's like, that's why I loved going to schools for school day. People, yeah, go to school day, make it exciting. Make it exciting. Let the kids come in and look at the back of the truck because they need to know the difference in South's like, don't hate Charles. We're a fire rescue. It's not that. It's what have we always been? I stopped it at the last conference I was at, where I was in a meeting with OEMS. It's the open meeting that they have at each conference to give updates, but they are having an open discussion. And David Newton let the room go and start talking, and he would help guide it, but he let us talk. And this one guy kept saying redheaded stepchildren. I was like, you got to stop. You got to stop saying that. If that's all we ever do, then we'll never be more. Because nurses got loud. They got a union and they put it out there. And even if there's not nurses unions everywhere, that's what helped with the nursing shortage was they got loud. They got lobbyists, if you will. They got people to say, hey, nurses matter. And they do. I don't want to. I've worked side by side with nurses in a hospital. I don't want to do their job. I like the job I had. Fire's been around since forever. You didn't do too great in Chicago in the early 1900s, Sal. But other than that, firefighters have been around for a while, doing okay. But it's loud. But it's not just loud in the public. It's loud in the public. Big red fire engines, big sirens, and noticeable. And honestly, at the worst times, when grandma's dying, that is a bad time. But the most public worst times when your house is burning down and everybody sees it. So they're very visible. EMS is, what is it? Right? Are you a nurse? Are you a CNA? Are you a firefighter? And that's where we have to figure out ways to positively and publicly get out there, as opposed to all the news stories being, AMR response times or this horrible medic. I mean, my wife shares so many stories with me to help share on one EMS's pages to go out and read. I dig through them. I try not to put too many negatives because there's a lot. Do you understand how many ambulances get into motor vehicle accidents, collisions on a daily basis? It's out there, and that's all the news is, and it's hard to figure that out.
Right. And I think that you got your fire trucks that have the air horn, those big air horns, and you have some ambulances that have it, but sometimes all you hear is the little wee wee wee, right? And people
Yeah,
don't hear it. They don't stop. The lights aren't bright enough. It's not in your face enough. I mean, at nighttime you get a better shot at it, but in
yeah,
the daytime you just blend in with all of the other noise that's going on around you. And but then also I think that people, when they see ambulance, they think death and dying. Not everybody getting in an ambulance dies. I used to
right.
think that too when I was a kid. I thought if you went in the back of an ambulance, you were dying. And so I think that's a misnomer that people have, and we got to dispel that too. But
Yeah,
people only know that when they or their family members have gone and they returned home better than they were. Those cardiac arrest saves, those saves from anything, those things need to be told in the public, just like firefighters saved this 7-story structure from,
mm-hmm.
our stories need to be glamorized like that too. And we don't have that, so we need more advocacy. We need to advocate for ourselves first, because
That's
I can't get an organization or entity or the lobbyists or the senators or the mayor or anybody to advocate for me if I don't advocate for myself. And
yeah,
I have pride in what I do. I'm proud of what I do. I transitioned into a hospital, but I'm still a paramedic, and I still do paramedic stuff. Now I don't get to intubate and all that other cool stuff like that, but I'm okay with that. I'm still a paramedic, and they respect what I do, because there are often times when they can't do what they need to do. I can come in and then I can do it. So we have a place. We just need to let the world know what our place is, what we do. And then,
yeah.
like I
That's
said, we love it.
exactly that's my marker, right? I know I've really succeeded in my goal of getting the public to understand who we are. When a little puppy with a faux hawk like mine and a little goatee shows up as a new ambulance, Paw Patrol puppy, and so right alongside fire and police, here comes the rock out of Paw Patrol. There's a few more minutes. I like to respect the time of our viewers and yourself, and I will talk for hours and hours and hours, as you know. But I want to hit a little controversy you hit me with about what
Woohoo.
EMS looks like to you. We were talking about protection and changes, and it spawned off of that conversation we're having after
Uh-huh.
the panel of other things that came up, and honestly, the whole response of, if you got to give a simplistic answer, I mean, just a one-off uniforms, then you're not ready to tackle the subject, and that's a bad place to be. It's weird. And one of the things you talked about as we were talking about it is you came from unions, and I'm like, oh man, this is Georgia. You can't, unions are the devil. And I want to do a whole nother show about unions later, but give me your 2 cents of why you thought unions were a good thing for what you did in New York.
Well, they provide a protection for you. Um, your employer can't see Georgia because where I came from, it's not a right to work state. So they have to have cause. And then your union will come in and defend you if that cause can be something that they can negotiate. For example, let's just say something happens on the job here. You fall, you get hurt. Um, they can find a way to terminate you, or they can terminate you for no reason at all, or they can terminate you because they just don't like you. In New York, they have in a union, they have to give you a reason. They have to have a valid reason, and you actually have someone that's there to advocate for you, to speak for you, to sit down and be an arbitrator between you and the manager. It's not you and the management arguing back and forth. It's your arbitrator there saying, seeing both sides of the story and coming to a happy agreement. And their goal is to come to an agreement in favor of their union member. And I think if we had something like that here, and people, it would give people hope that they just can't be fired for some silly arbitrary reason. They have stability. They'd have somewhat a voice to speak for them. Um,
Yeah, and
some
feel
I think
heard.
yes, and their voices would be heard. And see, one of the things that happens in where I'm from, if the union's not happy with the contracts, and the contracts are, our union members deserve this wage, they deserve these conditions, they deserve these amenities for these jobs. And if the contract comes up and they want something new, and the management of the organizations don't agree with it, well, there's a thing called a strike. Now, that's the last thing they want in healthcare because that has happened, and that puts a dent and a hurt on the organizations. Uh, so they try to avoid that. So they will come to the table and work with you. They can't give you just a no answer. They
Right.
have to work with you because they know what the repercussions of just saying no because I said so, and that just doesn't happen. I said
It,
so, so it's so. Yeah, no.
that power, and that I'm gonna take another stance on it as well, but that power gives keeps the lines of communication open.
Yes.
As in, I was literally told in a company, not EMS, but it was a medical company. I worked, put in about 8 hours. Um, oh, I did this one here. South says, unfortunately, union is a bad word in the South, but I agree with you 100%. It's a threat. And I'm gonna build on that. Both what both of you are saying. And I worked for a job where I put about 8 hours in doing this research at the time, what Georgia would give a company for teleworking, all these things to help reduce costs and boost productivity. It had numbers, and me and another guy worked on it, and had all, it's about a 3-page report. It wasn't massive, but had all this thing about how this company I worked for could get way more productivity with putting out a little bit more money. And actually, in the long run, it reduces your cost per piece by like 20-30%. Even though you're putting out more money, you're actually saving that much money. And what they did was I walked into the office and said, hey, I'd love for you to read this and that, the other. And they're, okay, cool, put it on my desk, dismiss, get out. Then hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later, they call me back in, and they'd read it, and they just wanted me to see them throw it in the trash. But yeah, that's not going to happen. We're not doing any of that to get out. I was like, yeah. I was like, and what that did was, being a right to work state, went, I don't want to work anymore. You don't value me. You didn't even say thank you for the time. You didn't explain why it wouldn't work. You didn't even show any concern. You just threw it away. And what I've done with my companies is what you just said with unions, with Sal says with it's a bad word, is everything I've been told about unions is us against them, and management doesn't want it because then all of a sudden they have to fight for everything and it makes a mess. If you go on strike, I was told this in EMS, right? Well, if they say you go on strike, you have to, and they take a chunk of your check, and this, but nobody gave the positive. Well, your check's bigger, and you're actually getting benefits and this other stuff. But here's the thing that I did learn from somebody like yourself who had been in unions. Well, it's not like all of that. it's a union is by at its heart there to represent, yes, the worker, but it's to keep the lines of communication open. And that's the thing with management, you never have to worry about a union. Now, if it's a New York State thing where it's the whole thing is that way, then you still have to work with the unions. But in Georgia, unions still can come in. They can still proposition your people. And I'm not worried about it at all because I get told on a regular basis, one of the greatest things about what we do with our companies is people feel heard. And that's what I want. So I want the communication. I'm giving way more communication than I'm getting. And I understand some companies are too busy for that. And honestly, that's a downfall. You need to make communication important. And ultimately, and we're going to do I'm going to do a whole nother episode. Probably have you on because you're my expert on unions that I know. So we're going to do a whole, well, you're the only one I know who's been in it, Laverne. You can help me out with real stuff.
Okay.
But that's it. That comes down to what EMS looks like to you, what one EMS does, what Laverne does every day in her career. Why I would argue Sal and other people who are watching this do is you have to understand why you love it. You have to be able to communicate that and show that, because in all honesty, I never got past the negativity of same crap, different day. I don't get paid enough for this. They is always the management. It's this faceless beast because we don't understand what they're doing, or we make up our own narratives. And it's all this negative stuff. And I never looked at the medic who'd been there for 5 years or more and went, then why are you still here? And I will encourage anybody to say that to anybody who's being negative. Why are you still here? Because if they're being positive, it's kind of obvious why they're still there. Then you might have to ask, well, if you're so happy, then what there has to be a downside. What's the downside here? So we can be realistic. But Laverne, before we get out of here, what's one last thing you would like to say along any of the things we talked about?
I think that life is what you make it. Your job is what you make it. And one of the things that I would do when people would say, "Well, how do you run those calls where it's just a waste of time, or their toe hurts, or they just want to ride to the hospital?" I said, "I come here, I clock in, and it's a job. That's what they're paying me to do. I get paid for every minute that I'm on that clock. So here's how I see it. If it's I used to say I consider myself self-employed. And the reason that I say self-employed because I'm a taxpayer. So if the taxpayer's footing the bill for this indigent person that can't pay that, I'm a taxpayer. So I'm paying the taxes that's paying my salary. So I'm paying myself to be here. So I'm here. And it's one call at a time. And you know what? It's not my emergency, it's theirs.
Yeah.
So and that's the way that was my coping mechanism. Now, that's not to say I didn't get frustrated a lot. There were days of frustration, but you got to get through that. You grind through it, and you just it's for the love of what I do. Putting that uniform on, and while I was at work in that truck in the city that I worked in, it was respected.
Yeah.
People saw you and they were happy to see you because they knew, all right, now you here, things are gonna change for us. And that
Things
just
gonna
it
be
just does
better.
something. Yeah, you're gonna
Yeah.
make things all better for me. Right. And
Yeah.
so if we could get uh to the generation that's coming up, and I don't just necessarily mean by chronological age, but this generation of people that are coming out of school that are entering into this career, if we could just get to them and just get them to see that part of it before they get to the you're never going to make any money, yada da da, all this other stuff. I think we would make a difference. You know, tell them you got to be a hustler like me.
Money's not everything. You do need to pay your bills. And if you're
Money is
not
not
paying your
everything.
bills, what are you getting out of that job? Because that's what will keep you happy. We could go on forever about all of that. To the point of my toe hurts, to the point of non-emergency transport, which is what my company's focus on. And I did a long video. It's on YouTube. It's public. It's on the Trinity EMS transport page on
Uh-huh.
YouTube. I'll probably download it and put it back on one EMS so everybody can see it. It talks about why what we do is important and it's life changing. And then it just comes down to, are you getting paid? You accepted a job. Who cares what the calls are? You show up, you said you're self-employed. I've been that way for a very long time. I didn't think about that with the 911. That was very, very cool dot you connected there. But I'm self-employed because I came in to get the job done that I want done today. And if you need me to take you to the hospital because your toe hurts, what else am I doing? Sitting around, right?
Yep.
And
You call,
that's
we
where we get
haul.
lazy. And yeah, I'm getting free money. No, go earn your money. And this is where I'm jealous. This is where I wish I'd said this at all, not just first, but at all. But Sal's gonna wrap it up here. EMS means earning my salary. There are so many opportunities out there. Someone always needs help. Good discussion. Thanks, Sal. Earning my salary. That I'm going to steal that and make that a shirt. EMS equals earning my salary. Oh man. So then that opens up the can of worms that we will talk about at future dates of how to improve pay, how to get the public behind us. There's some other things I wrote down like unions, but that's all said and good. Laverne, I know you'll be back, and we're going to talk about doing this once a month. We're going to try to do this. You can find other podcasts that I've done with other interviews with other people, as well as Laverne on 1EMS.com. And then all of our social medias is we are 1EMS. So YouTube, you do have to search it. Hey, you can help us out on YouTube. 100 followers, and when we can be, we are 1EMS on YouTube. Everything else is absolutely we are 1EMS. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I'm doing videos almost every day there. And of course, the hashtag is we are 1EMS, because at the end of the day, when we're out there in the field, no matter how differently we do things, no matter how differently we look from each other, like Laverne and I, she's all right and I'm super hot, so we look different. That's but at the end of all of it, we are 1EMS. Thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you for having me.